I was standing at the podium of Little Rock AIM Zion Church on McDowell Street in Charlotte, North Carolina, watching my business partner of 37 years walk toward the microphone with tears streaming down his face. It was September 22nd, 2024, my retirement celebration after 4 decades in the construction business. What David Mitchell said in the next 3 minutes would unravel everything I thought I knew about loyalty, friendship, and the price of silence. My name is Thomas Edward Reynolds. I'm 67 years old, and until that Sunday afternoon, I thought I'd lived a blessed life. I'd built Reynolds and Mitchell Construction from nothing into a company worth $4.3 million, employed 47 people, and helped build half the churches in Charlotte's historic West End. My wife, Patricia, and I had been married 44 years. Our 3 children had graduated from Howard University, North Carolina A&T, and Spelman College. We'd done everything right, or so I believed. The celebration had been beautiful. My pastor, Reverend Dr. James Thornton, had opened with prayer. My daughter Nicole had sung, "His Eye is on the Sparrow." The fellowship hall was packed with 200 people, friends from our Alpha Phi Alpha chapter, clients we'd worked with since 1984, and family members who'd driven from as far as Atlanta and Richmond. There were photo boards showing projects we'd completed, from the new wing at Johnson C. Smith University to the community center on Beatty's Ford Road. My granddaughter had made a slideshow with pictures spanning 4 decades. Then David asked if he could say a few words. "Where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are?" Before we continue with this story, if you're getting value from these real-life experiences, please subscribe to this channel and leave a like. It helps more people find these stories, and I read every single comment you leave. Now, let me tell you what happened when David took that microphone. David Mitchell was 65 years old, a man I'd known since we were both working construction jobs in 1980, before we decided to start our own company in 1987. He was lighter-skinned than me, always dressed sharp, had a way with words that made clients trust him instantly. While I handled the construction sites and crew management, David worked the business development side, bringing in contracts and managing the finances. It had been a perfect partnership, or at least that's what I told myself for 37 years. He stood at that microphone, his hands shaking, his voice breaking. "Thomas, before you retire, before you walk away from this company we built together, I need to tell you something. I need this church to witness what I'm about to say." The room went silent. My wife, Patricia, sitting beside me in her purple dress, grabbed my hand. I could feel her wedding ring pressing against my finger, the same ring I bought in 1980 with money saved from working double shifts. "In 1989, David said, his voice echoing through the fellowship hall, "I did something unforgivable. Something that's haunted me for 35 years. Thomas, I betrayed you. I betrayed this partnership. I betrayed everything we'd built together." My heart started pounding. People in the room shifted in their seats. I saw my son Marcus stand up from his table near the back, his face tight with concern. That year, when Hurricane Hugo hit Charlotte, when we had the Morrison Street project and the bank was threatening to foreclose, when your mother got sick and you were spending every night at the hospital, I made a decision without you. He paused, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. "I took $75,000 from our operating account and invested it in a land deal on my own. I forged your signature on the withdrawal forms. I told myself it was for the company, that I'd make the money back before you noticed. And I did make it back, Thomas. That land deal turned into $340,000 in profit over the next 2 years. But I never told you. I kept that money separate. I used it to buy my first rental properties, and those properties became the foundation of everything I own today." The room erupted. People were gasping, whispering, standing up. Reverend Thornton moved toward the microphone, trying to restore order. I just sat there, frozen, trying to process what I was hearing. Patricia was squeezing my hand so hard I thought she'd break my fingers. My mind was racing back to 1989. Hurricane Hugo had hit on September 21st, 1989, exactly 35 years and 1 day before this retirement celebration. The storm had caused millions in damage across Charlotte. Our company had been struggling. My mother, Dorothy Reynolds, had suffered a stroke on October 3rd and spent 3 weeks at Carolina's Medical Center before passing away on October 24th. I remembered, feeling like my world was collapsing. David was still talking. I'm confessing this now because I can't let you retire without knowing the truth. I've carried this guilt for 35 years. I've watched you work twice as hard while I prospered from money that should have been split between us. Thomas, I'm asking for your forgiveness in front of this church, in front of God, and I'm prepared to make this right. Whatever it takes. Then he walked over to where I was sitting and extended his hand. The whole room was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. I stood up slowly. I looked at his hand hanging in the air between us. I looked at his face, those tears that seemed so genuine. And something inside me, some instinct developed over 67 years of life, told me that something wasn't right. This confession was too clean, too practiced. A man doesn't carry guilt for 35 years and then suddenly decide to confess at a retirement party. There was something else, something he wasn't saying. I didn't take his hand. Instead, I said, David, I need some time to process this. This isn't the place for this conversation. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Reverend Thornton stepped forward and suggested we move to prayer, trying to salvage what was left of the celebration. But it was over. People started leaving, offering me awkward hugs and whispered condolences like someone had died. Patricia gathered our children and grandchildren. As we walked to our car in the parking lot, my son Marcus put his hand on my shoulder and said, Dad, don't let this go. Something about that confession felt wrong. Too convenient. He was 42 years old, a corporate attorney with Bank of America, and he had good instincts. I'd raised him to question things that seemed too easy. That night, I couldn't sleep. Patricia lay beside me in our house on Oakwood Avenue in the Biddleville neighborhood, where we'd lived for 38 years. I kept replaying David's words in my mind. Why now? Why at my retirement celebration in front of 200 people? If he truly wanted forgiveness, he could have come to my house, sat down with me privately, man to man. This public confession felt like theater, like he was establishing a narrative for some reason I couldn't yet understand. At 3:47 in the morning, I got up and went to my home office. I started pulling out old files from 1989, boxes I'd kept in the basement for decades. Bank statements, project files, partnership agreements. Patricia found me there at 6:15 a.m., surrounded by papers, wearing the same pajamas from the night before. Thomas, she said softly, what are you looking for? I looked up at her. The truth, because what David told me yesterday wasn't all of it. I can feel it. The next morning, Monday, September 23rd, I called Marcus. Son, I need you to help me look into something. I need to understand what David was really doing in 1989, and I need to do it quietly. Marcus didn't hesitate. I'll take a few days off work. Let me make some calls. Then I called my daughter Nicole, who worked as a forensic accountant with Deloitte in Atlanta. Baby girl, I need your expertise. Can you come to Charlotte this week? She heard something in my voice that made her say yes immediately. By Wednesday, September 25th, my children had gathered at my house. Marcus brought his laptop and access to legal databases. Nicole brought her accounting software and a sharp eye for financial irregularities. My youngest, Brandon, who taught history at West Charlotte High School, offered to help with research and documentation. Patricia made coffee and sweet tea, turning our dining room into a command center. I felt like I was 30 years old again, starting the business, fighting for something important. Marcus started with public records. That if David bought rental properties starting in 1990 or 1991, there will be deed records. Let me search Mecklenburg County property records. Within an hour, he'd found something interesting. David Mitchell owned 14 rental properties in Charlotte, all purchased between 1990 and 1995. The first one was purchased on March 3, 1990, for $127,000 cash, no mortgage. Cash purchase. Marcus looked at me and said, "Dad, you said David claimed he made $340,000 from that land deal. Where's the documentation of that sale?" Nicole took over, pulling up our old company tax returns, which I had kept meticulously organized. She spent 6 hours going through 1989, 1990, and 1991 returns. Then she stopped, her finger on a line item. "Dad, look at this. In the 1989 return, there's a withdrawal of $75,000 coded as equipment purchase, but I don't see any corresponding asset added to the company books. Then in 1990, there's another withdrawal. This one for $52,000, coded as Morrison Street Project materials. But when I look at the Morrison Street Project final accounting, the materials cost was only $31,000. There's $21,000 unaccounted for." I felt cold. "Keep going." Nicole's fingers flew over the calculator. By Thursday evening, she had a number written on a yellow legal pad. $247,000. That was the total amount of unexplained withdrawals from Reynolds and Mitchell construction accounts between 1989 and 1993. Not $75,000. Not even close. "Dad," Nicole said, her voice shaking, "David didn't steal from you once. He stole from you systematically for 4 years." Marcus added another piece. "And that land deal he mentioned? I searched property records for any land transactions involving David Mitchell in 1989 or 1990. There's nothing. No purchase, no sale. If that deal existed, it wasn't in his name. Either he used a show company or he was lying about it entirely." The room went silent. Patricia sat down heavily in her chair. Brandon, my youngest, who'd been quietly taking notes, looked up and said, "Dad, this sounds like he's trying to get ahead of something. Like he knows you're about to find out the truth. So he's confessing to a smaller crime to avoid the bigger one." That's when it hit me. David's confession wasn't about guilt. It was about control. He was trying to frame the narrative, admit to $75,000 to hide the $247,000. But why now? Why after 35 years? What had changed? I thought about the business. I was retiring, which meant we'd have to do a full accounting, a complete audit for the buyout of my shares. David knew that audit would reveal everything. So he confessed first, trying to minimize the damage, trying to make it seem like ancient history, like something he'd already atoned for. Friday, September 27th, I made an appointment with our company's accountant, Bernard Washington, a 58-year-old man who'd been handling our books since 1995. I didn't tell David I was coming. When I walked into Bernard's office on South Boulevard, I could see the concern on his face. "Thomas, I heard about what happened at your retirement party. I'm sorry you had to go through that." I sat down across from his desk. "Bernard, I need you to be honest with me. How long have you known?" He closed the door to his office. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said, "Thomas, I suspected something was off back in 1996, my second year working with the company. There were discrepancies I couldn't quite account for. But David always had explanations, and you were so busy with the actual construction work, I didn't want to bother you with accounting details. I figured if you trusted him, I should too. I've regretted that decision for 28 years. "Show me everything," I said. Bernard pulled out files he'd apparently been keeping separately. Over the next 3 hours, he walked me through a pattern of financial manipulation that made my stomach turn. The $247,000 Nicole had found was just the beginning. Between 1989 and 2024, David had systematically siphoned money from the company in ways that were technically legal but morally bankrupt. He'd created vendor accounts for companies that didn't exist, billing the company for services never rendered. He'd inflated project costs and pocketed the difference. He'd taken client payments directly into accounts I didn't have access to. Bernard estimated that over 35 years, David had diverted approximately $1.8 million from the company. Not all at once. Small amounts, $20,000 here, $35,000 there, spread out over years, hidden in the complexity of construction accounting. Thomas, Bernard said, the reason I could never prove anything definitively is because David was careful. Nothing was technically illegal. He had signing authority. He was a partner. But ethically, morally, he was stealing from you the entire time. I drove home in a fog. $1.8 million. That was money that should have been split between us. That was my children's inheritance. That was Patricia's security. That was retirement funds, college accounts, investments. All gone, funneled into David's pockets while I worked 60-hour weeks, managed crews in the Carolina summer heat, dealt with difficult clients and impossible deadlines. I trusted him completely, and he'd exploited that trust for 35 years. When I got home, Patricia was waiting. She took one look at my face and knew it was bad. I told her everything. She cried, not loudly, but tears rolling down her face, her hands covering her mouth. Then she got angry, angrier than I'd seen her in 44 years of marriage. Thomas Edward Reynolds, you are not going to let him get away with this. I don't care how long you've known him. I don't care that he confessed in church. That man stole from our family, from our children, from our future. You are going to fight this. I never loved her more than in that moment. Saturday, September 28th, I called a family meeting. My 3 children, their spouses, and Patricia sat around our dining room table. I laid out everything we discovered. Marcus immediately shifted into attorney mode. Dad, here's what we're gonna do. First, we don't confront David yet. We need more documentation. Second, we hired the best forensic accounting firm in Charlotte to do a complete audit of the company. Third, we engage a business litigation attorney. Fourth, we do all of this quietly. David can't know what we're working on. Nicole added, Dad, that public confession he made? That's going to work against him. He admitted to fraud in front of 200 witnesses. Even if he was only confessing the part of it, he established that he violated your trust. Any lawyer will tell you that confession is gold. Brandon, always the historian, said, Dad, document everything. Every conversation from this point forward, recorded if North Carolina is a one-party consent state, which it is. Keep detailed notes. Dates, times, what was said. This is your legacy we're protecting. I spent that weekend thinking about David. I thought about the day we'd started the company in 1987. We'd been sitting in a booth at Mert's Heart and Soul on North College Street, dreaming about being our own bosses, about building something that would last. I thought about the barbecues at his house, the way our families had celebrated holidays together. His daughter and my daughter had been in the same Girl Scout troop. Our sons had played basketball together at the YMCA. How do you reconcile 37 years of friendship with 35 years of betrayal? Sunday, September 29th, I went back to Little Rock AIM Zion Church. Same church where David had made his confession a week earlier. Reverend Thornton pulled me aside after service. Thomas, how are you holding up? I told him I was processing everything, trying to figure out what to do. He looked at me with those wise eyes that had counseled our congregation for 23 years and said, Thomas, forgiveness doesn't mean accepting injustice. God calls us to be forgiving, but he also calls us to be wise. Don't confuse the two. That afternoon, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront David with anger. I wasn't going to act impulsively. I was 67 years old. I'd learned in my decades on this earth that patience is more powerful than rage, that strategy beats emotion, that the truth doesn't need to be shouted to be heard. David had spent 35 years carefully building his lies. I would spend the next few weeks carefully building my case. And when the moment was right, when I had every piece of evidence documented and verified, I would reveal what I knew. Not for revenge, for justice, for truth, for the legacy I wanted to leave my children. Monday, September 30th, Marcus connected me with Angela Morrison, a business litigation attorney whose firm had offices on West Trade Street. She was a 52-year-old black woman who'd built her reputation representing small business owners in complex partnership disputes. When I walked into her office at 9 a.m., she already had coffee waiting and a legal pad ready. I spent 2 hours telling her everything. She took notes, asked sharp questions, and occasionally shook her head in disbelief. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Mr. Reynolds, you have a very strong case. But I need to be honest with you about something. Given your age, given the complexity of this, given the time that's passed, litigation could take years. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about her question. Was I prepared to spend the next 3 years of my life in courtrooms and depositions? Was I prepared to potentially destroy my business to get justice? Then I thought about my grandchildren, about the legacy I wanted to leave them. I thought about every young black entrepreneur who'd ever come to me for advice, asking how to build something that lasts. What kind of message would I send if I let this go? "Ms. Morrison," I said, "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes. Not because I'm angry, because it's right." She nodded. "Then let's get to work." By October 7th, 2024, Angela Morrison had assembled a team. Nicole, my daughter, worked with Morrison's forensic accountant to build a comprehensive financial analysis of Reynolds and Mitchell Construction from 1987 to 2024. Marcus coordinated with Bernard Washington to secure 37 years of company records. Every bank statement, every invoice, every withdrawal authorization. It was meticulous, exhausting work. But by October 18th, we had something powerful. A 147-page document that told the complete story of David Mitchell's financial manipulation. The forensic accountant, a woman named Dr. Sandra Chun, who testified in dozens of fraud cases, concluded that David had diverted not $1.8 million, but $2.3 million from the company over 35 years. She'd found patterns I never would have noticed. Vendor payments that went to companies David secretly owned. Insurance reimbursements that never made it to the company account. Even client referral fees that he'd pocketed instead of splitting with me. Every transaction was documented, cross-referenced, verified. It was devastating and irrefutable. Angela Morrison called me on October 21st. "Thomas, we're ready. The question now is how you want to proceed. We can file a lawsuit, which would be public and messy. Or we can arrange a private mediation. Give David one chance to settle this before it goes to court. Given his public confession, given the evidence we have, I believe he'll settle. The choice is yours." I thought about it for a long time. Then I remembered what Reverend Thornton had said. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting injustice. Let's try mediation first. But on one condition. I want it at the church. I want Reverend Thornton present as a witness. David wanted to use that church for his confession. I'm going to use it for the truth. The mediation was scheduled for October 30th, 2024, at 2 p.m. in the conference room at Little Rock AIM Zion Church. David didn't know what it was about. Angela Morrison had simply told his attorney that we needed to discuss the terms of my retirement, payout, and that I wanted to do it in a place that felt spiritually grounded. David's attorney, a white man named Richard Cassidy, who'd represented him for years, agreed immediately. They thought this was about me accepting David's confession and moving forward with a standard buyout. The day of the mediation, I arrived at the church at 1:30 p.m. Patricia came with me, along with Marcus and Nicole. Angela Morrison was already there, along with Dr. Chun, the forensic accountant. Reverend Thornton had opened the conference room for us. At exactly 2 p.m., David walked in with Richard Cassidy. David saw me and immediately came over, his arms open for an embrace. "Thomas, brother, thank you for agreeing to meet. I know my confession was difficult, but I'm ready to make this right. I've been talking with Richard about a fair settlement for that $75,000. I didn't return his embrace. David, sit down. We need to talk." Something in my tone made him stop. He and his attorney sat on one side of the conference table. My team sat on the other. Angela Morrison opened her briefcase and pulled out the 147-page report, sliding it across the table. "Mr. Mitchell, before we discuss any settlement, we need to address some discrepancies my client has discovered in the company's financial records. We've conducted a comprehensive forensic audit of Reynolds and Mitchell Construction from 1987 to present. The findings are detailed in this document." David's face went pale. Richard Cassidy started flipping through the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. David tried to maintain his composure. "Thomas, I don't understand. I confess to what I did. I'm trying to make it right. Why are we dredging up old?" I cut him off. "David, you confessed to taking $75,000 in 1989. You told 200 people in this church that you made a mistake 35 years ago. You cried. You asked for forgiveness. It was quite a performance." I paused, letting the words sink in. "But you didn't tell them the whole truth, did you?" Angela Morrison took over. "Mr. Mitchell, our forensic analysis reveals that between 1989 and 2024, you systematically diverted $2.3 million from Reynolds and Mitchell Construction. Not $75,000. Not in 1 year. Over 3.5 decades. You created fraudulent vendor accounts, inflated project costs, redirected client payments, and manipulated insurance claims. Every transaction is documented in this report with dates, amounts, and supporting evidence." She opened to page 47. "For example, in 1993, you created a vendor account for Piedmont Supply Services. That company doesn't exist. Over 5 years, you built Reynolds and Mitchell Construction. $187,000 for materials that were never delivered." David's attorney looked like he'd been hit with a hammer. "David, is this true?" David was sweating now, his confident facade crumbling. "Richard, I can explain. This is all a misunderstanding. Thomas, you know how construction accounting works. It's complicated. There are legitimate reasons for." Marcus leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm an attorney with Bank of America. I've reviewed every page of this report. There are no legitimate reasons. There's a pattern of fraud spanning 35 years. And you confessed to part of it in front of 200 witnesses. You established your own guilt." David stood up suddenly, knocking his chair backward. "Thomas, after everything we've built together, you're going to do this to me? You're going to destroy our partnership, our friendship, over money?" The desperation in his voice was real now, not the calculated emotion from his church confession. I stood up slowly, looking him in the eye. "David, you destroyed our partnership 35 years ago. I just didn't know it. You looked me in the face every single day for 35 years while you stole from me. While I was working 60-hour weeks, you were siphoning money from our company. While my children were applying for student loans, you were buying rental properties with money that should have been mine. While Patricia and I were budgeting carefully for retirement, you were living off my labor." The room was absolutely silent. Reverend Thornton sat in the corner, witnessing everything as I'd requested. I continued, my voice steady. "You want to know what hurt the most? It wasn't the money, David. It was the friendship. I trusted you. I would have given you the shirt off my back if you'd asked. If you had come to me in 1989 and said, "Thomas, I'm struggling. I need help," I would have helped you. But you didn't ask. You took. And you kept taking for 35 years. David's attorney tried to regain control. "Mr. Reynolds, what exactly are you proposing here?" Angela Morrison answered, "We're proposing that Mr. Mitchell pay restitution of $2.3 million, plus interest calculated at the legal rate, which brings the total to $3.7 million. We're also proposing that Mr. Mitchell relinquish his ownership stake in Reynolds and Mitchell Construction, transferring his shares to Mr. Reynolds for no compensation. In exchange, Mr. Reynolds will not pursue criminal fraud charges." David exploded. "Criminal charges? Thomas, you can't be serious. I'm 65 years old. You'd put me in prison?" I sat back down, my hands folded on the table. "David, I don't want to put you in prison, but I want justice. You stole from me for 35 years. That's not a mistake. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a calculated, sustained betrayal. And here's what I think happened. You knew I was retiring. You knew we'd have to do an audit for the BIAT. You knew I'd discovered the truth. So you confessed to a small part of it, hoping I'd forgive you and move on. You tried to control the narrative. You tried to make yourself the repentant sinner instead of the calculating thief." David collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. After 5 minutes, Richard Cassidy spoke. "We need time to consider this proposal. We need to review the forensic report, conduct our own analysis." Angela Morrison shook her head. "You have 72 hours. If we don't have an agreement by Friday, November 1st at 5 p.m., we're filing a lawsuit and forwarding our findings to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office. Mr. Mitchell has already confessed publicly to fraud. We have 200 witnesses to that confession. This isn't a negotiation. This is an opportunity for Mr. Mitchell to take responsibility for what he's done." David looked at me one last time, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Not the calculated emotion of his church confession, but real terror at the consequences of his actions finally catching up to him. "Thomas, please, think about our families. Think about everything we've built." I stood up, gathering my papers. "David, I am thinking about our families. I'm thinking about my wife, who worked as a teacher for 40 years while you lived in luxury from stolen money. I'm thinking about my children, who watched me work myself to exhaustion while you prospered. I'm thinking about my grandchildren, whose inheritance you stole. This isn't about destroying you, David. This is about truth. This is about consequences. This is about karma." Patricia, Marcus, Nicole, and I walked out of that conference room. As we stepped into the October afternoon sunlight, Patricia squeezed my hand and said, "I'm proud of you." "Thomas," Marcus added. "Dad, you handled that perfectly." Gave him every chance to respond. Nicole said, "The evidence is overwhelming. His attorney knows it. They'll settle." I felt something I hadn't felt since that retirement party on September 22nd. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but peace. The truth was out. The evidence was clear. The consequences were coming. For the next 72 hours, I waited. On Wednesday, October 30th, Angela Morrison called. "Thomas," David's attorney reached out. "They want to negotiate the terms." We spent 2 days in tense discussions. David's attorney tried to reduce the amount, arguing about valuation methods and interest calculations. But Angela Morrison was relentless. She reminded them repeatedly that we had documentation for every dollar, that David had confessed publicly, that criminal prosecution was still on the table. By Friday, November 1st at 3:47 p.m., we had an agreement. David Mitchell would pay $3.2 million in restitution, structured as $800,000 immediately and the remaining $2.4 million over 3 years. He would transfer his ownership stake in Reynolds and Mitchell Construction to me for zero compensation. He would sign a statement acknowledging his fraud and agreeing never to contest the findings of the forensic audit. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges. The agreement was signed at 4:53 p.m. on November 1, 2024, 7 minutes before Angela Morrison's deadline. That evening, I sat in my home office on Oakwood Avenue, the same office where I'd started this investigation 39 days earlier. Patricia brought me a glass of sweet tea and sat beside me. "It's over," she said. I nodded. "It's over." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad that 37 years of friendship had been built on a lie. Sad that a man I'd trusted like a brother had betrayed me for money. Sad that I'd spent 35 years working alongside someone who saw me as a mark instead of a partner. The following Sunday, November 3rd, I returned to Little Rock AIM Zion Church. Word had spread through the congregation about what had happened. People approached me carefully, respectfully, not sure what to say. Reverend Thornton pulled me aside before service. "Thomas, how are you feeling?" I thought about his question. "Honestly, Reverend, I feel free. I spent 35 years carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. David's betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about truth. And now the truth is out. The burden isn't mine anymore. It's his." During his sermon that morning, Reverend Thornton spoke about karma without mentioning my situation directly. "Karma isn't about revenge," he said. "Karma is about consequences. When we make choices, those choices create ripples that eventually return to us. We can hide our actions for a day, a year, even decades. But truth has a way of revealing itself. And when it does, we face the natural consequences of what we've done." I felt like he was speaking directly to my experience. David's public confession hadn't been about repentance. It had been about trying to minimize the consequences he knew were coming. But truth doesn't negotiate. Truth simply is. Over the next 3 months, I finalized the transition of Reynolds and Mitchell Construction. I changed the company name to Reynolds Construction Group and brought in Marcus as Q and Nicole as CFO. My children would run the company moving forward, building on the legitimate foundation I'd created, free from David's corruption. We restructured the finances, brought in new accountants, and established safeguards to prevent what happened to me from ever happening again. The first payment from David, $800,000, went into a trust fund for my grandchildren's education. That money, stolen from their grandfather's labor, would now fund their futures. In December 2024, I ran into David at a grocery store on Beatty's Ford Road. It was awkward, unavoidable. He was in the produce section, looking older than I'd ever seen him, the weight of consequences visible in his posture. He saw me and stopped. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, quietly, "Thomas, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am." I looked at him, this man I'd known for more than 4 decades, and I felt something unexpected. Compassion. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never. But compassion for someone who'd spent 35 years building a house on a foundation of lies and was now watching it collapse. "David," I said, "I hope you find peace. I really do. But that peace has to come from real repentance, not calculated confessions. It has to come from facing the full truth of what you did, not just the parts you thought you could get away with admitting." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away. I continued shopping, picking up groceries for Sunday dinner with my family. Life goes on. Truth prevails. Karma works in its own time. Now, as I sit here telling you this story in January 2026, more than a year after that retirement celebration changed everything, I think about what I've learned. I learned that age gives you patience, and patience gives you power. I learned that dignity is more valuable than revenge. I learned that real justice isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about revealing truth and letting consequences follow naturally. I learned that the values my parents taught me, the values Patricia and I tried to pass to our children, they matter. Integrity matters. Truth matters. Character matters. David Mitchell paid every dollar he owed. The final payment came through on November 1st, 2025, exactly 1 year after we signed the settlement. He sold most of his rental properties to make the payments. He downsized his life, moved to a smaller house, drives an older car now. Some people in our community say I was too hard on him, that I should have just accepted his apology and moved on. But I don't believe that. Forgiveness without accountability isn't grace. It's enabling. Justice without consequences isn't resolution. It's permission for others to do the same thing. My grandchildren ask me sometimes about what happened with Uncle David, as they used to call him. I tell them the truth, age appropriately. I tell them that people aren't always who they seem to be. That trust is earned through consistent actions, not just words. That when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. That protecting your legacy isn't about being vindictive. It's about being responsible to the people who depend on you. That karma isn't something you create through revenge. It's something that naturally occurs when truth meets consequences. Reynolds Construction Group is thriving now under Marcus and Nicole's leadership. We've hired 12 new employees in the past year. We've completed major projects, including the renovation of the historic West End Community Center and the new sanctuary at Mount Carmel Baptist Church. The company that David tried to steal from is now stronger than ever, built on a foundation of genuine integrity instead of hidden corruption. That's not revenge. That's redemption. I'm 68 years old now, officially retired, though I still stop by the office once a week to offer advice when my children ask for it. Patricia and I travel more, visit our grandchildren more, spend time with friends from church and our Alpha Phi Alpha chapter. I found that retirement is sweeter when you know you fought for truth, when you know you've left a legacy your children can be proud of. Not a legacy of anger or bitterness, but a legacy of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it costs something. If you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to know something. Your pain is valid. Your anger is justified. But don't let that anger turn you into something you're not. Don't let someone else's betrayal steal your dignity. Be strategic. Be patient. Be thorough. Document everything. Build your case. Then let truth do the heavy lifting. You don't have to destroy your enemy. You just have to reveal the truth and let natural consequences follow. And if you're watching this and you've betrayed someone, if you've stolen from a partner, lied to a friend, manipulated someone's trust for your own gain, I want you to know something too. Confession without restitution is just public relations. Real repentance means facing the full truth of what you've done and accepting the full consequences. It means making things right, not just managing your image. Karma is patient, but karma is thorough. What you've hidden will eventually be revealed. The question is whether you'll face it on your own terms or someone else's. Before I close, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this story, for taking time out of your day to hear about my experience. If this resonated with you, if you've learned something, if you've felt something, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what lesson you're taking away. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because these stories matter. Your stories matter. Our experiences, our struggles, our victories, they're how we teach the next generation what integrity looks like. My name is Thomas Edward Reynolds. I'm a 68-year-old black man from Charlotte, North Carolina, who built a business, raised a family, and learned that truth is more powerful than lies. That patience is more effective than rage. and that karma doesn't need our help to work. It just needs time and truth. Thank you for listening. May you find truth in your own struggles. May you find strength in your own battles. And may you always remember, dignity is power, character is wealth, and the truth will always, eventually, prevail.